What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Mind of Mac podcast, Mind of Mac number 10. So glad and thankful that you can join me and you are listening or watching this video right now. I really appreciate it. And this podcast is going to be a freaking good one because we're going to be comparing two of my most favorite things in the world and what this hip-hop and what this podcast is primarily about. And those two things are hip-hop and mixed martial arts. We're going to talk about their cultures and how similar they are because they have many similarities between them. And we are going to dig all into that. We're going to kind of talk about the evolution of them. They're both fairly recent cultures or things that have been created compared to overall time of, the earth and kind of how long things have been around or, what they compare to has been around. Mixed martial arts to fighting and hip-hop to music or just kind of sounds. And hip-hop is not a music in general. We're gonna dig into that. So just pause on that idea and those thoughts for a second because I want to talk about a live show that me and Silas of Bew Life just did over in Lowell, Mass this past weekend, Saturday, February 16th. Yeah, it was pretty dope. We headed out from Provincetown, Cape Cod over into Massachusetts, past Boston. And we did a live hip-hop performance over at this art gallery called Uncharted Gallery. Big shout out to Uncharted. Really cool spot. I forget the name of the artist they were showing in there, what show it was, but he had some really great paintings, pretty abstract, crazy colors and just themes, and yeah, it just looked really crazy in there. And it was really cool. They also had pizza there, so, I mean, that's like my ultimate spot. It's a performance venue where they have music every night. It's an art gallery and they have pizza. So, I mean, that's my kind of spot. It sounds like a dream business for me. So who knows? Stay on the lookout. But yeah, Saturday was a freaking awesome time. That was my first time DJing for an artist. Really recently this past year is the only time I've DJ'd in front of people, so it was at a bar or, I've had a lot of radio DJing experience, but DJing in front of a crowd that is there to just see you or be on stage, it was different. It was interesting, and I had a lot of fun, and yeah, it was only the first time, so, I have things I want to work on and tons of ideas and stuff like that, but I think we did very good. We played 4 new songs off of our upcoming EP coming out in mid-March, so stay on the lookout for that. We're going to have a title dropping soon, a single probably dropping very soon, so stay on the lookout. Make sure you connect with us on social media and all that stuff. I'll link it up below. But yeah, we played like 4 songs that have never been heard by anybody, maybe just one person, Berg. Shout out Berg. We was on podcast number 4. But yeah, he's really the only one that has heard beats and some lyrics of our EP. And we just played, like I said, like 4 or 5 new songs for a crowd that has no idea who we are, what our sound is like, and it really is a completely new sound. So it was very interesting to see the faces and the reactions and get some feedback from it. I just loved it, had a great experience, and really hope to do it again. We got a bunch of stuff lined up, so just stay on the lookout because we're going to be partying. We're going to be going around and getting it popping. Shout out to Bulgaria right now, and shout out to my parents who brought me back this mug from Bulgaria. I believe it is of the Tsar or the ruler King Simeon or Simon, something like that. But when he was the ruler of Bulgaria, it was when it was at its largest. It had 3 C's, as they like to say. So yeah, shout out to my parents and shout out to Bulgaria for their history and culture. And yeah, we're going to be talking about culture today, but Bulgaria has been around for many, many thousands and thousands of years, I believe. And yeah, very rich culture and history. And that's something I really love. But today, the culture and history we're going to be talking about is of 2 more short-lived or things that aren't as old yet, hip-hop and mixed martial arts. I apologize if the podcast looks a little choppy or cut up a little bit. My camera only records freaking 12-minute videos at a time, so I'm going to have to jump up and keep pressing that. But we will try to keep it as smooth as possible. But let's just jump on into this. So, like I mentioned, hip hop and mixed martial arts cultures are fairly recent cultures, but have roots dating back to the beginning of time. So, let's start out first of all by giving you a definition of culture. So here's a couple ones that, just come up from Google real quick. The customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of a racial, religious, or social group. The set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or an organization. The set of values, conventions, or social practices associated with a particular field, activity, or societal characteristics. So that's what a culture is, and let's kind of talk about mixed martial arts as a culture. So what is mixed martial arts, or MMA? It is a contact sport that allows a wide range of fighting techniques, including stand-up, clinch, and ground fighting. So stand-up fighting is obviously punching, kicking, elbows, knees while you're standing up. Clinch fighting is kind of while you're more wrestling. So as you guys tie up, or as the people tie up to either take each other down or do whatever kind of techniques or they want to do from inside of there. And obviously ground fighting, which includes wrestling positions and, moves, and also heavily influenced by Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's the main ground fighting style. We'll just leave it at that. So mixed martial arts officially started with the UFC about 25 years ago. November 1993 in Denver was actually their first show. They recently just celebrated their 25-year anniversary, so they had a show back in Denver. Little fun fact there. But mixed martial arts, martial arts and fighting have really been around since the beginning of time. So that's just an interesting thing there. Because hip-hop is kind of the same thing. Everything that's used in hip-hop dates back to the beginning of time. But we'll get there in 1 second. But like I said, the UFC was really the first official mixed martial arts contest. But down in Brazil and in Japan, they had this thing called Vale Tudo, which was pretty much like no rules. That's pretty much what it means, I believe. And it was pretty much the first idea of mixed martial arts. Now, the first UFC was put together to see which fighting style is the most elite. So they had wrestlers, boxers, jiu-jitsu artist Royce Gracie, who actually ended up winning the first thing and showed that Brazilian jiu-jitsu is the dominant form, or is the most dominant martial art. But that's how it was put together, almost like a tough man contest to kind of see which style was the best. But today it has evolved into a sport with high-level athletes that are well-trained and proficient in many, or all, if not all, styles of martial arts, including boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, karate, wrestling, judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, keto, kung fu, whatever you want it to be. Taekwondo, a lot of people start with Taekwondo, karate. That's what I did as a little kid. And as you get older and as time has evolved, kids aren't just starting with Taekwondo anymore. They're starting doing mixed martial arts and just learning all these disciplines. So it's very interesting to see how it's evolved very quickly over these 25 years. And like I said, Royce Gracie won the first. He won the first 3 of 4, or he won 3 of the first 4 UFC tournaments. So yeah, like I said, that kind of proved that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was the superior style. Royce Gracie was probably the smallest of the Gracies at that time. Size-wise, he was a skinny kid, 170 pounds, and he went in there and destroyed these huge guys. He submitted them, made them tap out, and it was just a shock to the world. Nobody thought that this little guy in a gi would be able to do what he did, and it was very amazing, and that really opened up the world, the eyes. It opened up the eyes world. You can't even freaking talk. But yeah, it was eye-opening to the world what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu could do, and it really helped create the UFC and make mixed martial arts what it is today. All right, so hip-hop can be viewed in many ways. It can be viewed as a music genre. That's what people mostly view it as, but it really is a collective consciousness, a culture that is worldwide, an art and philosophical movement. Now, most of these ideas that I'm going to talk about is stuff that I learned and heard about from KRS-One, who was an MC, the teacher, KRS-One, knowledge reigns supreme over nearly everyone. So there's always history and lessons to be learned and values that come from hip hop, and that's really the tradition that he tries to uphold, that he was taught from Africa Bambaataa. So that's kind of what all these ideas that I'm going to talk about come from. Really, kind of KRS-One and the origins of hip hop. Okay, so let's break down hip hop, right? So the actual term hip hop, hip is to know, to be up to date. Hop is to move. So hip hop can be broken down or seen as intelligent movement, smart movement, smart flow, something like that. That's how hip hop could be seen as, if you kind of really just break that down word for word. That's not really where it came from, but if you go back and you look at all these things afterwards, which is what KRS does in his book, The Gospel of Hip Hop, which I read, and a lot of these values and ideas come from, but there's lots of knowledge and things that relate to hip hop. I'm a strong believer in the universe and putting things out there, and affirmations and things like that. And hip hop, if you look back at it through that sort of lens and kind of study the history of it from there, there's many things you can learn from it, and it truly is a culture. It's almost like a religion. It is. So the mighty Zulu Nation, if you want to learn more about this, go do some more research. But hold on, just stick around real quick. Let me break down hip-hop culture a little bit more for you before you get too deep into KRS-One, because it could be a little confusing. So here's like a Cliff Notes version first. So hip is to know, hop is to move, so intelligent movement. We started that. And it really, hip-hop, the culture really started as a way to stop the violence of the gangs in New York City from killing each other and putting their energy into more constructive and less violent and positive things. So hip hop is almost 50 years old. It really started in the late 70s is when the music hit the scene, but the mixing of the elements and of the culture, they really came to life through park jams at abandoned buildings in the Bronx, New York. But all the things that they were doing in those jam sessions is stuff that has been going on since the beginning of time, very much like mixed martial arts. The evolution of what it is today is crazy, but what it started out as are things from thousands of years ago, basic techniques. So let's break it down in the hip-hop style. So the early humans, they were making noises to communicate, noises and signals to communicate, and they're going to point where they want to go, right? So making those movements. So that's really like rapping and beatboxing, and making those movements is kind of like dancing, right? Forever tribes have, been banging on drums and having traditional ceremonies where, like I said, they're banging on drums, making music and dancing. So that kind of is, like the DJ providing the sound. And once again, with the breakdancing, movement, ritual dancing, running from animals, from predators, from prey. In New York City, as they were breakdancing on the streets or in the subway, they had to run from the cops and do their thing, even though these guys are just dancing. But, that's just a vague similarity right there. So movement, like I said, ritual dancing, something that's very big in hip-hop culture is graffiti writing or tagging. And cavemen, they were writing on walls, right? We found these things are really happening. So from the beginning of time, all these elements of hip-hop culture have been around. Hip-hop has been around forever, but it's just at this one point in the 70s in the Bronx where it kind of all came together and came to light and mixed and kind of was birthed in this particular way. But hip-hop, all these elements have been around forever since the beginning of time. So the elements of hip-hop, which were really outlined by Africa Bambaataa, who I just mentioned earlier, were taught and carried on by KRS-One, as I mentioned. So the core four elements of hip-hop are DJing, MCing or rapping, breakdancing, tagging, which is like graffiti writing, and beatboxing. Excuse me, those are five. DJ, MC, breaking, graffiti. Those are four. The fifth one would be beatboxing. And there are other elements of hip-hop that include street knowledge, street fashion, language, and entrepreneurialism. So those are kind of all the ideas and elements that encompass hip-hop, and then within each one of those, it's kind of its own even deeper subculture and things like that. But those are the main main elements that started hip-hop. Got 4 pages of notes here, so stick around. We got a lot of good stuff coming up. Today, hip-hop is the most popular genre in the world, and if it is not the most influential culture in the world, it is right up there in the top 3. Everywhere you look, whether it be on TV commercials, billboards, dance moves in children's video games or dance moves wherever, it's influenced by hip-hop. It's really kind of crazy, so keep an eye open for that. So both of these have evolved, and both of these things, hip-hop and mixed martial arts, evolved and will continue to evolve based on the nature of them. Music will continue to be made, and the progress in general. That will be, I'm just making sure I'm kind of all on the right page here. I kind of got lost. But music will continue to be made and progress in general. That will be sampled or used to make new music. New rhyme schemes and new styles will happen. Martial arts are always trying to find new ways to beat their opponents, such a wide range and ways to finish a fight that there are endless possibilities. So again, that just kind of talks about the evolution that will continue to happen with these two cultures. Music, hip-hop was started based on sampling old music and vinyl records, so new music is being made at a faster rate than any nowadays with technology and people being able to upload and, make things from their basement and stuff like that. So there's more music than ever to be sampled now and used again. And the techniques, people are always just trying to get better and figure out new ways to mess with their opponents or switch things up. So these two things will continue to evolve. And in 10 years, these two things can look completely different again. So hip-hop and mixed martial arts are both sort of looked down upon by the mainstream, even though they kind of are the mainstream or taking over the mainstream. Hip-hop, because of the content of mainstream hip-hop, money, drugs, and violence is looked down upon. So what really gets played on the radio is things that make money and generate interest, which happen to be sex, money, violence, drugs, and that's kind of with anything, right? That's probably what video games sells the most is Call of Duty or some violent fighting game, things like that. And hip-hop is kind of the same way. That's what gets pushed to the forefront, but, there are tons of other things that, around hip-hop that it encompasses. There are many different artists speaking on different topics, making way more positive music and trying to spread a message that doesn't get recognized by the mainstream culture. So it's kind of weird. Hip-hop is so popular, it's hard to ignore it. Music and dance can be seen all over TV shows and commercials, like I said. And hip-hop recently took over rock music as the highest-selling music genre, and the streaming numbers really blow every other genre out of this world. So hip-hop, because of how it started, it was kind of even just shooed and shrugged off, and hip-hop was going to be a fad, but it has really taken over the globe, and hip-hop culture is even stronger and more to the core in other countries such as like France and Germany. They really are about hip-hop and preserving the culture and just keeping things traditional how it was. And not that it has to stay that way, but the way things evolve sometimes with the mainstream getting a hold of it and people who are not invested in the values of hip-hop that try to just make money off of it, that's where things kind of go wrong and get skewed, and that happens in America with freaking everything, right? Let's be real. So mixed martial arts, similarly, is in the same situation, looked down upon by the mainstream culture. The UFC was illegal in almost all 50 states and now is legal in 48 states. That just talks to the evolution of it. It was outlawed in all these states because it was seen as barbaric, cockfighting, all these different things were said about it. But the UFC, over time, they added rules and weight classes, so it wasn't a no-holds-barred sort of outlaw, tough man competition. And it really turned into a legitimate sport, and it sort of followed boxing outlines, like I said, rules, weight classes, timed rounds, and everything is really regulated by the Athletic Commission. So they will be in charge of making sure everybody's on weight, and all these fighters go through medicals and taken care of and paid, all that stuff, compensated, all that good stuff. So it's kind of crazy. There used to only be like a UFC every 3 or 4 months, and now there's a fight card almost every freaking weekend. So it's crazy, the evolution in that way. To see, I used to anticipate a fight card so much, waiting for it. There's so much build up for it, waiting every 3 months, and now it happens so often. It's really hard to keep up with it. But still, it's mixed martial arts, it's cage fighting, and it's now on ESPN, the most mainstream sports network there is. And, it's still looked down upon by people who don't know it or don't understand it. It just looks like two guys trying to beat the crap out of each other on the feet, or two guys just rolling around on the ground. But there's tons of technique and training and dedication that goes into this that people don't realize. It's not just this tough man competition that it started out as years ago. Because of key figures like Jon Jones, Ronda Rousey, Conor McGregor, the sport has gotten to the mainstream eyes, and different demographics and markets are now interested in the sport. That being the African American market, there's a lot more of them who are interested in it, and are getting more involved in the sport, getting more title shots. There's Jon Jones. There's a couple African American champions in the UFC right now, and even just Africans that are coming up the ranks. Jon Jones, Tyron Woodley, Israel Adesanya just fought recently, Francis Ngannou. There's a big female contingent that is now following or getting involved in mixed martial arts. It's crazy just to see the evolution of just female mixed martial arts since they came to the UFC 5 or so years ago. The skills of the entire pool of women, I would say, rose tremendously over the past couple of years compared to what it usually used to be. And Conor McGregor really helped bring the Irish and more international eyes to the sport, which, once people watch it and sort of understand it, if I sit down and have a conversation with you about mixed martial arts as we're watching it, you are going to enjoy it and understand it and hopefully like it more afterwards. So both of these things, fighters and artists, to cause controversy, they kind of create headlines and tend to get more exposure and preferential treatment that way. And that's just kind of how everything is in the mainstream, right? Whoever kind of makes the loudest noise or does the stupidest thing will get the attention, right? Even though there's other people doing way positive things and better things that never really get recognized, which is kind of crazy. Hello. That's a guitar. Look out. But, like I said, while others work quietly, that work on their craft, not to get into the headlines, tend to get overlooked. So that happens in mixed martial arts with fighters who don't talk a lot, who are maybe not the most exciting fighters, but they're very skilled. For example, Demetrius Johnson. He didn't get a lot of recognition, but he really is one of the best fighters ever. And that goes the same for hip-hop artists as well. I'm talking more specifically from like a music standpoint. There's many MCs that are great that are overlooked. Like one that I'll just name out randomly because he's a very different style and is not really part of the mainstream is MF Doom. Like one of the best lyricists and producers of all time. Like just a crazy style. And he just gets overlooked and doesn't really get mentioned in the GOAT conversations or best of all time, things like that. But he was super innovative and did things very differently, had his own style, which should be recognized. But people who are more loud and making music, freaking Tekashi 6ix9ine, I hate to even say that name on this podcast, but, people who do dumb things and say dumb things and make dumb videos and get the headlines, they get the attention and exposure. So, yeah, I wonder how many people Googled MF Doom versus Tekashi 6ix9ine since the beginning of 2019. Like, that's just a crazy number. I'd like to investigate or see who got more clicks in that time. It's pretty obvious what the answer is, but that is just a very interesting thing. Back to this mainstream thing, hip-hop artists who just work on music, not all over social media or have a positive message. They don't really have the same popularity as others do. Like two people that'll name kind of like that is Logic and John Bellion, both artists on Visionary Music Group. Two guys that really just love to work on music and kind of perform music. And all the extra stuff is kind of just extra stuff. Artists nowadays, they feel like they're locked into social media. They have to do all these things and do all these extra things to stay up to date with their fans. Well, obviously with the fans, but they just have to do all this extra stuff and posting, and I got to get this chain or wear this outfit. I got to show them this and that. And it's just a whole almost like you're almost like acting. Like it's like this character that you need to keep up with. So people who keep up with that tend to stay in the mainstream and make the most noise, even though their music might not be the best. It's kind of everything else that surrounds them that gives them popularity and stuff like that. But Logic and Bellion really want to be known more for their music, and I appreciate that. And yeah, that kind of, like I said, that compares to the quiet, very technically skilled UFC fighters out there like Demetrius Johnson. So both of these cultures are very sample heavy, right? That's kind of crazy to think about. So obviously hip hop samples using old vinyl records. I kind of spoke about that earlier. But in mixed martial arts, like I said, it's mixing a whole bunch of different disciplines of martial arts. So people who are Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys, they need to learn stand-up, to get into the UFC. You can't just be great in one discipline and be able to fight. You need to be able to prove yourself, and, you've had fights before. The line of the bar for UFC caliber is kind of skewed a little bit and blurry, but that's a topic for another conversation. But Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artists, they need to borrow from certain different styles to be able to compete. So they're going to learn boxing techniques. They're going to learn Muay Thai techniques. For a better example, let's say there's a boxer that gets into MMA. So he started out doing boxing. That's kind of his base and where he's best at. And then he needs to learn all these other techniques. So even though he's a boxer, he's going to learn how to do some elbows and knees like Muay Thai. So that's almost like sampling. He's using all these different styles. He's got his normal boxing style, but then he'll be able to mix in an elbow, sample that Muay Thai style to make a new style, kind of. And that's kind of what hip-hop does with vinyl records. It takes different aspects, different pieces of vinyl records. It could be a small piece, it could be a big piece, and it mixes them together to make a whole new one, almost like a collage. If you're looking at it for an artwork perspective, you're cutting out pieces from magazines, you're gluing it all together, it's a new thing. You're sampling vinyl records, you're making new music, it's a new thing. Artistic elements, you're taking certain ideas about depth and lines and color value, and you're putting them into this artwork, or you're using certain techniques from Pablo Picasso and Basquiat, but then it's your own new thing. But it kind of, these ideas, it didn't come from nowhere, it came from somewhere else. So hip-hop and mixed martial arts, very sample heavy. All right, that was just all off the dome. Let me see if there's any notes here that I missed. Both, when someone uses a sample. Okay, so here it is. How to compare both of these together and, show how they're similar. When somebody uses a sample in music, or an obscure sound or genre that nobody knows, or somebody in mixed martial arts uses a technique that nobody's seen before in a fight, it's very exciting and pushes things forward. So that's just, again, the evolution of the two things. It will never stop, because music will never stop being made. People will never stop being influenced by music or things around them. So it's kind of hard to imagine that music will never be around. And that kind of goes the same with martial arts and fighting, right? So people are always going to be trying to get better and figure out new ways to defeat their opponent, figure out new techniques, things that they haven't seen before. And with mixed martial arts being around as long as it has been, like, the things that are going on now are crazy. The crazy spinning techniques. Demetrius Johnson doing a suplex, which is like a takedown, and as the guy's in midair, he gets an armbar on him. Like, it's just insane. That's never been seen before, never even been thought of before. I want, besides him and his team, I guess. So yeah, props to the evolution, and I'm looking forward to what these things are going to look like in a couple years. And yeah, many different styles within hip-hop and mixed martial arts. So hip-hop samples from all different music genres, but primarily soul, R&B, funk, rock, and blues. So each of those kind of have their own sound and style. People also make music just from like a keyboard and whatever instruments they have on their computer program or that they have around their house, you know what I mean? There's international music, international hip-hop. So it really, how it started out, once hip-hop kind of spread to the world, other countries tried to do hip-hop how America was doing it. But since the culture is universal and translates everywhere, once it was kind of in those countries for a little bit and they understood it, they were kind of able to flip it to their own their own way. So they were able to talk about their own struggles or things going on around them, or use international samples, use French samples instead of using American soul music. You know what I mean? So hip hop, both of these cultures are universal and translates, no matter what you look like, what music you speak, what language you speak, music and fighting. Bottom line, those two things translate to everybody. But like I said, hip hop is more than music. It's a culture that encompasses all these different things that have been around since the beginning of freaking time. Pay attention. Hope you're taking notes. But yeah, some more styles of rap music include trap music, traditional or classic, kind of boom bap, conscious hip hop, gangster rap. There's many different dance styles, dancing styles like popping and locking, break dancing, kind of on the floor, spinning around in your head, footwork, acrobatics, capoeira. It's kind of crazy because capoeira is like a mixed martial art. Oh, one other connection between these two things, which is really crazy because it even relates to me also, is that a lot of the early hip-hoppers were influenced by kung fu movies. So shout out to the Wu-Tang Clan, obviously, out of Shaolin. But all the early hip-hoppers were influenced by these Chinese kung fu flicks. So even the style and the way they dressed, and Bruce Lee, pretty much all these guys, they say that they were very heavily influenced by these movies. I guess because let's try to think back. I heard a couple interviews, but Bruce Lee he was seen as somebody who was kind of looked down upon, or I forget the exact comparison, but the black kids in New York City at the time, they kind of felt the same as Bruce, like they were in a similar position as Bruce Lee was, or people were in these kung fu movies trying to fight back. And they took a lot of inspiration from that. Like I said, whether it be the fashion, actually getting involved in martial arts, but they also took a lot of these values and traditions from martial arts with them. Honesty, doing your best, practicing, all these sorts of things. And it translated to hip hop culture as well. And it's really crazy when all these guys said that they were influenced by these kung fu movies and Bruce Lee, because really that was the first thing that I can remember that really interested me, was seeing like Tiger Showman's commercials on TV and wanting to do martial arts. So that's really kind of crazy to me that Bruce Lee was one of my first influences and of things on a path that, whatever path I was going to go down as a person, about what I would be interested in. And now hip hop is one of the things I'm most interested in also. So it's just kind of cool how things come first circle and there's a connection there. Different styles. I just talked about a whole bunch of different styles of hip hop. So now martial arts, like I mentioned earlier, there's all these different disciplines. So boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, karate, wrestling, judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Any style of fighting is usually someone's base, and then they will train in other forms after that to become a mixed martial artist. So like I mentioned, a kid might start wrestling in elementary school all the way through college, and then he has all these skills in this one area of the mixed martial arts craft, and then after he graduates college, he'll go and learn boxing and all these other things and kind of mesh it all together, and then kind of work his way up to the UFC. Or people will start out in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and kind of the other way. So that's how a lot of people get involved with mixed martial arts. But like I said, now there are schools that, as kids, they're not just learning Taekwondo, karate, they're learning mixed martial arts from the jump. So I think that's really cool. And the evolution we will see from these kids learning the whole gamut of techniques from the beginning, I can only imagine what we're going to see in 10, 20 years. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be like some robots out there. I don't even know. But a couple more things between these two cultures. They really are the fastest growing sport and music genre in the world. Mixed martial arts, like I said, it just got on ESPN. The popularity has kind of taken over boxing. And yeah, there's gyms popping up all over the place. Where I was from in Long Island, there's tons of schools that opened up everywhere. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools, specific UFC gyms, things like that. And yeah, around the world, the UFC is going to all these different countries that they've never been before and where fighters have never came out of. So they're kind of building up all these markets all around the world. So that will even speak to more of the evolution because of these different cultures and their influence on martial arts and what they will bring to the table. So even more evolution there. It will never stop. So hip hop and mixed martial arts, from the people, if you take the mainstream out of it, the people who know within it, they're the ones that really know and can talk about it. So the rank or perception within of your skills within these two things, hip hop and mixed martial arts, is really based on your skill. It's not based on anything other than that. Race, gender, where you come from, what culture you come from, what you believe. It shouldn't be, at least. If you're in the right spot, it shouldn't matter. It really is based off of skill. And that's a value that these two things hold up the most. Let's look at it. Eminem. You know, people are going to say the mainstream pushed him, this and that, but he is one of the technically best rappers that ever recorded music. Like, hands down. Say what you want about his new stuff, whatever it is. Technically, he's one of the best to ever do it. And he's a white guy out of Detroit. You know, all these different things. Female martial artists are now headlining UFC events. Females never headline boxing cards, really, unless it was maybe like an all-female card. And even like WWE, which is totally different than mixed martial arts, but they're kind of in that combat sports thing. But women were never headlining pay-per-view wrestling events until Ronda Rousey did it in mixed martial arts. So they're very martial arts and hip hop are very progressive and forward thinking in that way, in that it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, bring your skills. And if you got it, you got it. You're going to go to the top. You'll be able to beat that person in a rap battle, in a breakdancing competition, in a fight. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's based on your skill. So if you have the skill to beat that person, you know, that's where your rank and your perception is based off of pure skill. And that's what I love about these two things. But if we talk about the mainstream part of it, we go back to the people who talk more. Like, I'll just bring up Conor McGregor, right? Doesn't deserve all the fights he gets, but because of his talk and the interest and the popularity he has, he's seen as being better, or he will get the extra fight. Or same thing with people who talk a lot and don't make the best music in hip hop. You know what I mean? They just kind of make them headlines and talk about that stuff. So yeah, like I said, both of these things are very progressive. Female fighters headline major pay-per-view cards, and recently Cardi B won the best rap album at the Grammys, and she was the first female to do so. So 2019, you know, a little late to the party on that, but we're progressing. There's evolution happening. A quote from Robin Black that kind of fits well into this. He was recently on the Luke Thomas radio show, and as I was kind of prepping this podcast, he said this, and it relates perfectly to this. He said, "Fighting is an expression of individuality." Maybe I'm going to actually clip that quote and I'll put it in at the end of the podcast so you can listen to it. But fighting really is an expression of individuality, and that relates to all the elements of hip hop culture also. Graffiti on the wall, it's an expression of what you feel inside and what you're trying to see, right? You're dancing, you're MCing, you're DJing. And fighting. These are all expressions of individuality. So that's just another way that they relate. Shout out to Robin Black. He really talks about mixed martial arts and breaks it down in a different way. He doesn't just say this person won because they set up the big overhand right with the left hook. He breaks down all these other things that go into it. The mental aspect of it. There's so many different parts of fighting besides just the technical aspect. You know, the whole training camp that leads up to it, your mental health. Like, he just kind of breaks down and philosophizes about mixed martial arts in a totally different way. So shout out to Robin Black. He's actually a big inspiration of mine to get into podcasting and start doing this thing on my own. And yeah, that'd be great to have a conversation with him one day. So Robin Black, I'm coming for you, baby. Hope you guys all enjoyed this podcast. I want to know what you think about these cultures, if you liked it. I could probably talk about this a little more. This was the first one. You know, I had notes. I was getting up and down to record. It's getting a little dark in here, so I got a lot of things running through my head right now. But I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Hope you liked it. Hope you learned something. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. And stay tuned, because the next podcast I'm going to be interviewing somebody from town. Her name is Patia. It's actually going to just be called the Patia Cast. It is all about her. I'll just go ahead and say that right now, so get ready for it. She is a henna tattoo artist in town. She's from Slovakia, and she is just a artist in general. So stay on the lookout for that. It's a really good conversation we have. And until next time, protect your neck, people.
fighting is an expression of individuality, right? Like whether you are, and I always like to compare it to a jazz musician or a punk rock musician or a country musician. They're all playing music, but they're all individuals. Some of it is learned. You grew up on a ranch, so you play country.
Right.
Some of it is just who you are. And then sometimes you're expressing some other thing. You know, the quietest guy in the world is a heavy metal guitar player. And that's Michael Venom Page. He's this kind, gentle, generous, sweet individual. But when it comes down to fighting, he's a heavy metal weirdo.